If I cook well, will you feed my sister? The silence that followed was so deep you could hear the hum of the studio lights. 200 people in the audience, 4 celebrity judges, 12 cameras, and no one could say a word. Elijah was 12 years old, black, and standing in the center of the brightest stage he had ever seen in his life. His apron was a dish towel tied around his waist. His sneakers had holes at the toes. And his eyes carried a seriousness no child should have to bear. Sorry, what did you say? Vincent Crawford, the head judge, leaned forward. Owner of a luxury restaurant chain valued at $200 million, he wore a watch that cost more than an apartment and had the kind of smile that appeared on business magazine covers. My sister Hope, Elijah repeated, his voice steady despite his trembling hands. She's 7 years old. She hasn't eaten properly in 4 days. If I win, the prize money will feed her for a whole month. On the side of the stage, the production director gestured frantically to the camera operators. This wasn't in the script. Kids in cooking competitions talked about dreams of becoming chefs, not about sisters going hungry. But the cameras kept rolling. This was television gold. Chef Lorraine Mitchell, the judge on the left, felt something tighten in her chest. At 58, she was the only black judge on the show and the only one who had built her career from nothing, without family money or connections. She recognized that look in his eyes. She had seen it in the mirror 45 years ago, when she was a girl in Detroit cooking for her younger siblings while her mother worked 3 jobs to keep up with rent. This is a cooking competition, not a charity show, Vincent declared, leaning back in his chair with his arms crossed. If you came here to beg, you've got the wrong address, kid. A murmur rippled through the audience. Some people booed. Others applauded Vincent. The camera focused on Elijah's face, searching for tears, searching for the breaking point that would make for good editing. But Elijah didn't cry, didn't back down. Instead, he did something no one expected. He smiled. I didn't come to beg, sir. I came to cook. And when you taste what I can do, you'll understand this isn't charity. It's an investment. The response caught Vincent off guard. His eyes narrowed, studying this boy who was too thin, whose clothes were too worn, who dared to speak to him as an equal. We'll see, he said coldly. We'll see. In the waiting area, 8 other child contestants watched the scene on the monitors. All well-dressed, all clearly from wealthy families, all surrounded by proud parents who had paid for private culinary lessons since they were 5 years old. A blonde 11-year-old girl, Brittany Palmer, daughter of a famous New York food critic, turned to her father and whispered loud enough for everyone to hear, "Daddy, why did they let that boy in? Look at his clothes." "Don't worry, princess," her father replied, not even bothering to lower his voice. "He's here to make you shine brighter. Contrast, you understand? When you win, your victory will look even more deserved." Elijah heard every word through the hallway speakers. And for the first time in a long while, he felt a pang of something he hadn't experienced in years, pure, controlled anger. But he took a deep breath and let it pass. His grandmother always said anger was a dangerous ingredient. It could ruin any recipe if you didn't know how to measure it. What no one in that studio knew, not the judges, not the audience, not the cameras broadcasting live to millions of American homes, was that inside Elijah's torn backpack was a worn notebook. A notebook filled with recipes handwritten by someone who had died 2 years ago. Someone who had taught Elijah not just how to cook, but how to transform simple ingredients into works of art that would make Michelin-starred chefs weep with envy. And there was something else in that notebook. A folded page at the end, with specific instructions written in shaky handwriting. Only open when you're ready to show the world who you really are, my grandson. 2 years living on the streets of Los Angeles with his sister Hope had been enough. 2 years cooking in shelters with whatever was left over. 2 years transforming scraps into meals that made homeless people smile for the first time in months. Elijah was ready. As the assistants led him to the waiting area, where Brittany and the other children laughed and pointed at his torn clothes, he maintained the calm of someone who holds a secret too powerful to reveal before the right moment. His eyes met Lorraine's for a brief moment through the monitor. And something passed between them, a silent recognition that made the veteran chef frown, intrigued. There was something about that boy. Something she couldn't identify yet, but that made her heart beat faster. If this story of a boy everyone underestimated is touching your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what happens when Elijah finally steps into that kitchen will prove that some people are born to rewrite the rules of a world that insists on keeping them down. In the waiting area, Elijah sat in the farthest corner, away from the other children who whispered and laughed while pointing at him. His torn backpack sat in his lap, protected as if it contained treasure, because it did. "Hey, homeless kid," Brittany approached with 2 other contestants behind her. "My dad wants to know how you got into the show. Did you lie on your application?" "I didn't lie about anything." "Oh sure." She rolled her eyes. "I bet you don't even know the difference between Julienne and Brunoise." Elijah didn't respond. He just kept stroking the cover of the notebook inside his backpack. "Hey, I'm talking to you." Brittany stepped forward. "Do you even know how to cook anything besides instant noodles?" "I know a few things." "Like what?" "Heating up shelter food." The others laughed. But Elijah just looked up and met her eyes with a calm that made her step back half a pace without understanding why. "My grandmother always said arrogance is the favorite seasoning of mediocre people. It makes everything taste like defeat." Brittany's face turned red. She opened her mouth to respond, but a production assistant interrupted. "Contestants, in 10 minutes we start the first challenge. Everyone to the kitchen." As the children dispersed, Elijah finally opened the notebook. He ran his fingers over the recipes handwritten by his grandmother, Josephine Carter. Each page carried not just ingredients and instructions, but stories, memories, love transformed into words. Josephine had been a private cook for wealthy families in Atlanta for 35 years. No one knew, but she had trained some of the most famous chefs in the country when they were just arrogant beginners who thought they knew everything. She never received credit, never had her name on restaurants. But her knowledge, her secret techniques passed down through generations, was all there in that notebook. And now it belonged to Elijah. "May I sit here?" He looked up. Chef Lorraine was standing in front of him, holding 2 wrapped sandwiches. "Judges aren't allowed to talk to contestants," Elijah said, suspicious. "Officially, I'm just resting my feet." She sat next to him and placed a sandwich between them. "And this sandwich just accidentally fell here." Elijah looked at the food. His stomach screamed, but he didn't touch it. "It's not for me. It's for my sister." Lorraine tilted her head. "Where is she?" "Outside the studio. An assistant said she couldn't come in because she didn't have credentials." "A 7-year-old is alone out there?" "Hope knows how to take care of herself. She's stronger than she looks." Something in Elijah's tone made Lorraine's eyes fill with tears she quickly disguised. This was more than a competition for this boy. It was survival. "What's your full name, son?" "Elijah Josephine Carter." Lorraine froze. Her fingers gripped the bench tightly. "Josephine Carter. My grandmother. She died 2 years ago." The world seemed to spin around Lorraine. Josephine Carter. The woman who had found a 13-year-old black girl crying behind a restaurant in Detroit 45 years ago. The woman who had taught that girl to cook, to believe in herself, to transform pain into culinary art. That girl was Lorraine. And she never knew Josephine had a grandson. "Your grandmother," Lorraine asked, her voice trembling, how did you end up here?" "Cancer. The insurance denied treatment. They said it wasn't economically viable for a 68-year-old patient." Elijah recited the words as if he had memorized them from reading the denial letter so many times. "After she died, the state wanted to separate me and Hope. Put us in different homes. So we ran. 2 years on the streets. 2 years learning that food is more than nutrition. It's dignity. It's love. It's the only thing I could give my sister when I had nothing else." Lorraine needed all her strength not to hug that boy right there. "Elijah, listen to me. Vincent Crawford isn't just arrogant. He's dangerous. I heard him talking to the production director. They want you to fail. They're going to give you the worst ingredients, the worst equipment. They want to turn you into a joke to boost ratings." Elijah nodded calmly, as if he had expected that all along. "My grandmother taught me chess when I was 6. Always think 3 moves ahead," she used to say. "And what are your moves?" Elijah smiled, that same mysterious smile that had unsettled Vincent on stage. "You knew my grandmother. You know she never just taught recipes. She taught strategy. And what I'm going to do in that kitchen." He paused, putting the notebook back in his backpack. It's not just cooking. It's showing everyone that excellence doesn't ask permission to shine. At that moment, an assistant appeared at the door. Contestants, the challenge starts in 2 minutes. Everyone to your stations. Lorraine stood up first, but before leaving, she whispered, "Your grandmother changed my life. She made me who I am today. And if you have half the talent she had." She paused, her voice choked. Then Vincent Crawford has no idea what he's about to face. Elijah walked toward the kitchen with his grandmother's notebook held against his chest. The other children were already at their pristine stations, with premium ingredients organized and professional utensils gleaming under the lights. Elijah's station was different. Second-rate ingredients. Dented pans. A stove that clearly had problems. Vincent watched from a distance with a satisfied smile. But what he couldn't see was the folded page at the end of Elijah's notebook, the page he had finally decided to open. And the words written there would change everything. "My grandson, when you read this, know that Vincent Crawford was my employer for 5 years. And I know all the secrets he hides. Use them wisely." Today's theme is transformation. Vincent announced to the cameras with his rehearsed smile. Each contestant will receive ingredients and have 1 hour to create a dish that represents their personal story. Judges, audience, and all of America will decide who deserves to continue. Elijah looked at his station. While Brittany and the others had filet mignon, lobster, truffles, and fresh vegetables, he had received scraps. Literally. Wilted vegetable remnants, a piece of cheap meat, and broken rice. Vincent passed behind him and whispered low enough for the cameras not to capture, "Good luck turning garbage into food, kid. You're going to need it." But Elijah just smiled. "Thank you, sir. That's exactly what I have experience with." The timer started. 1 hour. Brittany worked with rehearsed movements, clearly repeating techniques she had practiced hundreds of times in private lessons. The other contestants followed the same pattern, efficient, technical, predictable. Elijah did something different. He closed his eyes for 3 seconds, took a deep breath, and let his hands work on instinct. 2 years cooking in shelters with whatever was left over. 2 years transforming scraps into meals that made people smile. Every cut, every seasoning, every movement carried the memory of his grandmother guiding his hands. At the judges' table, Lorraine watched with her heart racing. She recognized those movements. The way Elijah held the knife, the rhythm of his preparation, the way he felt the ingredients before using them. It was Josephine. It was as if the woman who had changed her life was there, working through her grandson's hands. Vincent frowned, sensing something wasn't right. The boy should be panicking. He should be failing. But instead, he worked with precision that made no sense for someone who supposedly never had formal training. Time. The timer sounded. One by one, the contestants presented their dishes. Brittany made a technically perfect beef Wellington, but soulless. The others followed the same pattern, expensive restaurant food, beautiful but forgettable. Then it was Elijah's turn. He walked to the front carrying a simple plate. Creamy rice with caramelized vegetables and the cheap meat transformed into something that released an aroma that silenced the entire audience. "This is called Grandma's Embrace," Elijah said, looking directly at the cameras. "My grandmother Josephine taught me that true cooking isn't in expensive ingredients. It's in the love you put into every step. She used to say anyone can cook with truffles and lobster. But transforming scraps into dignity? That takes soul." Vincent picked up his fork with disdain, clearly ready to destroy the dish with criticism. But when the food touched his tongue, his face changed. He knew that flavor. He knew that specific seasoning, that caramelization technique, that impossible balance of spices. "Where?" Vincent's voice faltered. "Where did you learn this recipe?" "From my grandmother, Josephine Carter. The woman who worked in your kitchen for 5 years, Mr. Crawford. The woman whose recipes you stole to open your first restaurant." The silence that followed was absolute. Vincent went pale. "That's a lie. I never." Page 47 of her notebook. Elijah pulled the notebook from his backpack and opened it to the marked page. "Original recipe for Crawford risotto, which you registered under your name in 1998. Page 52, The secret sauce that made your reputation. Page 58. The caramelization technique you teach on your shows as if it were yours. Lorraine stood up, tears streaming down her face. Josephine told me about this once. She said a man had stolen her work, but it wasn't worth fighting because no one would believe a black cook over a rich white businessman. The audience began to murmur. Cell phones were raised, recording everything. This is absurd. Vincent stood up, his face red with rage. You're going to believe a street kid? This is a setup. A conspiracy to destroy my reputation. It's not a conspiracy, Mr. Crawford. Elijah kept his voice calm, exactly as his grandmother had taught him. It's justice. My grandmother kept everything. Letters, receipts, dates. She knew the truth would come out one day. She just didn't know it would be through the grandson you tried to humiliate on national television. Vincent looked around, desperate. The cameras kept rolling. The live broadcast was reaching millions of people. His career, his reputation, everything was crumbling in real time. Cut. Cut the broadcast, he shouted at production. But the production director just shook his head. This is live television, Vincent. And ratings just tripled. Lorraine walked to Elijah and placed her hand on his shoulder. Josephine would be so proud of you. Not just for your talent, but for the courage to do what she never could. Elijah looked at Vincent, who was now surrounded by security guards being invited to leave the studio. My grandmother used to say the best revenge against injustice isn't anger. It's excellence that cannot be denied. He paused. You tried to turn me into a joke. But you ended up giving me the stage I needed to tell the truth. Outside the studio, a 7-year-old girl watched everything through the glass window. Hope had her hands pressed against the glass and tears of pride streaming down her face. Her brother had promised everything would be okay. And for the first time in 2 years, she believed it. 6 months later, Elijah adjusted his chef's hat as he entered the most famous kitchen in Los Angeles. The restaurant Josephine's Table had opened 3 months ago and already had a 4-week waiting list. Brother, look at this. Hope ran to him holding a magazine. The cover showed Elijah's face with the headline, The 12-year-old who brought down a culinary empire and won over America. He smiled and ruffled his sister's hair. She had gained weight, her cheeks were rosy, and most importantly, she smiled every day now. The night of the competition had changed everything. The video of Elijah confronting Vincent Crawford reached 85 million views in 1 week. The hashtag Justice for Josephine trended at #1 on Twitter for 3 days. Journalists investigated and discovered that at least 12 other black cooks had similar stories, women whose work had been stolen by Vincent over 30 years of his career. The lawsuit was devastating. Vincent lost the rights to all the stolen recipes. His restaurant chain declared bankruptcy when investors abandoned ship. His wife filed for divorce when she discovered he had also hidden millions in offshore accounts. At 58, the man who had humiliated Elijah on national television now lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in the suburbs of Nevada, working as a freelance consultant for restaurants that didn't even bother to put his name on their website. Every time he turned on the television and saw Elijah's face on some talk show, he tasted the bitter flavor of regret that came too late. Brittany Palmer also had her life transformed, but in a different way. 2 weeks after the competition, she appeared at the door of the shelter where Elijah was still temporarily living, holding a handwritten letter. I came to apologize, she said, unable to look him in the eye. My father taught me that people like you existed to make people like me look better. But I was wrong. He was wrong. Elijah read the letter in silence. It was long, full of grammar mistakes and tear stains. It was the most honest thing Brittany had ever written in her life. My grandmother used to say everyone deserves a second chance, he finally replied. Except those who never gave the first one. Brittany frowned, confused. Are you giving me a second chance? I'm giving you a first one. Because before, you never tried to really know me. Today, Brittany worked as a volunteer at the Josephine Carter Foundation, teaching basic cooking skills to homeless children. Her father, publicly humiliated by his association with Vincent, had lost his job as a food critic. But for the first time in her life, Brittany was learning that her worth didn't depend on putting others down. Chef Lorraine Mitchell fulfilled the silent promise she had made that night in the studio. 6 weeks after the competition, she filed for adoption of Elijah and Hope. The process was finalized in 4 months, a record, according to the social worker who handled the case. Josephine saved my life when I was 13, Lorraine said on the day of the final hearing, holding both children's hands. She gave me purpose, direction, a reason to believe I could be more than the world said I could be. Adopting her grandchildren isn't charity. It's gratitude. It's completing a circle that began 45 years ago. The restaurant Josephine's Table was more than a business. It was a living monument to the legacy of a woman who never received credit in her lifetime, but who now had her name in golden letters on the most beautiful facade in the city. Every Saturday, the restaurant served free meals to homeless people. It was Elijah's idea. "We don't forget where we came from," he explained when a journalist asked about the initiative. "Every person in that line could have been me a year ago. The only difference between us is that I got a chance. And now my job is to create chances for others." The Josephine Carter Foundation had already helped more than 300 children in its first year. Free cooking classes, scholarships, support for at-risk families. All funded by the restaurant's profits and donations that kept pouring in. On the main wall of the restaurant hung a black and white photo of Josephine Carter at 35, smiling in the kitchen of a mansion where she worked as a domestic servant. Below the photo, a plaque with the words she repeated every day to her grandson. "True cooking isn't in expensive ingredients. It's in the love you put into every step. Anyone can cook with truffles and lobster. But transforming scraps into dignity? That takes soul." Elijah looked at that photo every morning before starting service. And every morning, he whispered the same thing. "We made it, Grandma. We made it." Hope approached and held her brother's hand. "Do you think she's watching us?" Elijah smiled, his eyes glistening. "I'm sure she is. And I bet she's complaining that I put too much salt in yesterday's sauce." They laughed together, a light, free laugh, full of future. 6 months ago, a 12-year-old boy asked a question no one expected. "If I cook well, will you feed my sister?" Today, that boy fed hundreds of people every day. Not because he had to, but because he could. And that's the difference between surviving and living. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a comment. Because stories like Elijah's remind us that it doesn't matter where you come from, what matters is what you do with the opportunities you earn. And sometimes, the greatest revenge against those who tried to destroy you is simply becoming someone they could never have imagined.